Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports. This is something new that we're doing. We've got a few different faces on the screen here. Christian, my guy, down at the bottom there, at Snacks for Tweets on Twitter, our Storm beat writer here at Circling Seattle Sports. It's nice to have Christian on. We had him on an episode of Circling Seattle Sports on Converge. He wasn't happy with the quality. I understand that, but it was good to have you on. Right, it only makes sense to have our beat guy in the Storm segment of the show, and we've got Rowan here. Rowan this is your CSS debut, which is funny.
It is. I'm excited.
Rowan has been with the Next Hoops and still does some stuff for the Next, but will be helping our Storm coverage in a variety of ways, kind of like our version of a Swiss Army knife or a versatile player like a Joyner Holmes that we'll talk about at the end of the show. But this is the Storm Roundtable. We're going to get myself, Charles Hamaker, Christian, and Rowan to talk about a bunch of different things throughout the course of the season. We'll probably talk, midway through the year when we get to the Olympic break, right? That'll be just such a way to overview things. But we want to do things monthly as well. The month of May finished. By the time this comes out, we'll have June 4th, their game against Phoenix to look at, and the Mercury. But just to go over a few different things, whether it's general thoughts, the core four, biggest surprises on the team, and a bunch of different other things, including roster moves, like what happened today that we'll go over at the end. So, Christian, Rowan, again, great to have you on. Really excited to get this sort of thing going. Trying to do more for our coverage of the Storm, and like we talked about off camera, just for women's sports as a whole, just because there's so much going on, not always good. In the world of the WNBA and women's sports as a whole. So we'll get directly into it with our opening thoughts on the month of May. There was all this sort of, from some media, right, panic about this team a weekend. You play mini twice, you lose to them both times, including double overtime. And since then, you lose to the Liberty on the second game of a back-to-back. It's all a tough situation. And then since then, you're on a winning streak. You look a lot better. The team's finding its rhythm of sorts. You're on a winning record right now. So just some opening remarks. We'll start with Christian since he is our Storm beat writer. And then once Christian wraps up, we'll go with Rowan, and I'll clean up whatever is left there. So Christian, what are your thoughts just on this team through the first few games of the season and in the month of May?
So through the first few games of the season, you bring in Skylar Diggins-Smith, you bring in Nika McKay, and you lose your first two games. Pandemonium. The world was melting. Like, no one could believe it. Oh, my God, how could they? And the whole time I'm saying, like, this Minnesota team is really good, guys. Like, you have to give them their credit. But as far as on the Seattle point, I just always knew that at some point early on, sooner rather than later, they would, start hitting on all cylinders. And that's what we've seen after the 0-2 start. Skylar Diggins-Smith said, give her 5 to 7 games. And, as far as learning the language on the court and in general with her teammates, that 5th game was the first game of this team's current 4-game win streak going into the Tuesday matchup with Phoenix. So overall, I feel like one of the biggest pieces of why they are, playing as well as they are right now. Of course, it's easy to say Skylar Diggins-Smith. Right now, over the last 4 games, she is averaging 18.5 points, 7 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. Only at the efficiency of 68.5% effective field goal percentage. She's really getting to her spots. The shots that she's taking aren't forced. And like her and Coach Noe said in numerous pressers, a lot of the bunnies that she was getting to start the season just weren't going down. Like, look, so we've seen her convert for the last 10 years, going back to her college days in Notre Dame. But now we're seeing those shots are going down. She's playing with confidence. Everything's looking great as far as her game. And everyone else has really benefited from it,
Yeah, just echoing what you said. I mean, I think generally there was some panic at the beginning when, they started 0-2. I think that a lot of people underestimated Minnesota because of how their record was last year. And I think people were like, oh my gosh, if they're losing to Minnesota, who are they going to beat? But I think Minnesota has since kind of proven that, it was as competitive, their games have been that competitive. And I think in the same breath, the Storm have, kind of proven that they are also up in that conversation of top 5 teams. They're top 5 in the league right now in the rankings. And That was not how the beginning of the season started, obviously. But yeah, I think that Skylar is a huge piece of that. She's really finding her groove. I think with Nika as well, like we all knew she was so great. And honestly, like, honestly, I feel like I kind of took her for granted a little bit in LA. I was like, she's always been, doing what she does in LA. And I'm just, when someone's with a team for so long, it's kind of like with Diana Taurasi, you don't forget about them. Like that's not really the right word, but it's kind of like, you've been doing it, I kind of forget that you can make an impact on any roster. And her coming in, I think that it was really exciting, but you've really seen like Neka's talent can translate to any team that she's on, and she's been really, really great. And I think that the core four, they're all playing really well together right now, better than I expected, honestly, because we've seen with some of these, super teams, if we'll call them that, like, with last season with the Liberty and the Aces, people were kind of like, how can all these people work so well together? And I felt that way this season, honestly, going into the Storm game, to the Storm season. So I've been really impressed. I think that they're playing really well together. And I think that, clearly it's only up from here, it feels like. I think we've seen the steady progression just getting better and better. And, now with a winning record, 4-game winning streak, like I think they're in the best position they can be going into June.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too into some of the, like, I'm excited to talk about Skylar and Nika. And it's crazy that we can talk about this and still realize you've got Jewel Lloyd and Ezi Magbagor. But I do realize these are our opening thoughts. Yeah, I didn't expect them to come out on a heater, right? Like, that'd be awesome. It'd be great. Sure. I mean, you had big crowd opening night. I mean, when I think about Minnesota, I think it was overtime last year, and Napheesa Collier just bucket. And I'm like, please leave me alone. Like, it's how I felt 2 years ago in the playoffs. And the PA guy, Chelsea Gray for 3. I'm like, leave me alone. Stop. Yeah, I didn't expect a heater. Minnesota, to Christian's point, as he said time and time again from that opening week, they are heavily underestimated, which is unfair to them. But no, it's been great seeing Jordan come off the bench and provide strong minutes. I was a little surprised to see her come off the bench, but really, as we've seen and as we saw last year, her bringing instant impact, whether it's defensively, pushing the ball up, sometimes maybe a little slowing things down on offense. And I think she's realizing that. But like you said too, with Nika, like I've texted Christian this during games. I'm like, it is a wonder to watch her work. And he said it, and I've thought about it since then. She is the key. Like, if you can, whether it's working on her with the ball, working her off ball, just it's all going to be remarkable. And as both of you have remarked, we are early into things, and they are going to get better. They're going to work together better. So from there, that leads it great into it, because I really want to talk about it with this core four, whether it's Skylar, Nika, Jewel, and Ezi. With Skylar, I'll start us off here. It's been remarkable when I do the game day posts, right? Because we've got, player of the game and then all the statistics points. And I've had Skylar a few times as my player to watch, just her not finding her true game yet and still averaging double digits in points, being a factor in passing lanes with those steals, and still being a great distributor and bringing that intensity on defense, of course. Like, for that to be someone who's not firing on all cylinders and still be one of the better players in this league is remarkable. And, I talked before we got started, I talked about it off camera a little bit, but, Christian got this great clip of Noe talking about Skylar and giving her grace after the Liberty game, just considering she is coming back to playing in the W and is a mother of 2. And it's it just is so remarkable to think about all that and realizing the athlete and competitor that she is. So, I mean, thoughts generally on Skylar? I know you've both touched on her, but I will go in reverse this time. Rowan, just anything to add on Skylar and her play so far in this core four?
I'm just so happy to see her somewhere where she is thriving and where, she's getting along with everyone. And, it seems like everyone really has her best interest in mind. Like, it feels like, you know, I mean, even if we're talking about Tina Charles, which I know is not the same, you know, but similar situation, if we're talking about it, I think that there are a lot of times when, you know, people just need to find their right system, and it feels like, you know, and their right coach that will kind of help them. And it seems like Skylar's found a really great place in Seattle. It feels like, you know, I loved that clip that you posted of, you know, Noe talking about Skylar, like just her knowing that she has that support, especially after what we know happened with Phoenix, you know, supporting her, you know, during her, you know, during her pregnancy and everything. I just think that it seems like her having that support has just really helped translate to her confidence on the court and just, you know, having a really good time. And I'm just really happy for her, you know, that chemistry wise. But yeah, I agree with you. It's crazy that she is not, I do not think she's at her full potential yet. You know, you're with all these people that you haven't played with, you're in this new system that we know, you know, that Noe has a really specific system, and she's still figuring it out, but she's still contributing. You know, she's the third highest scorer on the team. She's just doing a great job. So I think that that's only going to continue to get better. I've loved watching her and Jewel play, you know, next to each other. I think that she's just been exactly what the Storm really, really needed last year, with a strong ball handler who can also make really tough shots. I think that was something that last year was really difficult, was finding a point guard that could also translate to scoring. And so I think she has just been the perfect fit, honestly. Yeah.
You know, it's insane to think that Skylar Diggins-Smith, you know, spent 20 months away from the game. And within 10 games, she's top 5 in assists per game. She's top 5 in a total assist. And like you just said, third in scoring on the team. There's so much that she does for this team that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, despite a lot of things that she does that show up on the stat sheet. You know, it's taking the ball out of Jewel's hand, not because, you know, she takes too many shots or anything just like that. It's the fact that she shouldn't have to take that many shots, you know, which is why Nika, Skylar, as he maturing in her role, you know, blossoming as an all-star, all of these things coming together makes it so much easier for their franchise player and Jewel Lloyd to really be who she is. And Skylar helps out with a lot of that. A lot of different looks that they've given, especially as far as the post-entry pass. A lot of teams don't really execute that from what I've seen. Jewel, Skylar, the big passing with NECA in the core four to Ezzy, Mercedes. I mean, they've really all been clicking on another note. And it's just really been beautiful to see. But again, like Skylar at the, you know, she's, like they've said already, the head of the snake. When she's playing well, when she's in her mind, you know, doing well what she knows she can do, this team, the sky is really the limit. You know, as funny as it's as corny as it is, that's really the truth with this team, you know?
Oops, sorry about that. You know, and to that point, you know, Christian talking about Skylar contributing off the court. I talked to Nika Muhl after practice today, and she was talking about the different veterans, and that'll be in a piece on its own. But she was like talking about Skylar and the impact that she's had, and she said Skylar will talk at you and motivate you to no end. She will go in there and get you super motivated, and just, you know, seeing her in press conferences, she's sitting there after the what game was it? Oh, it was the Washington game at home. She had the poncho on. She was sitting there joking and having fun. Like, it's been remarkable to see, you know, just the narrative that was around her in Phoenix, right? And all the stuff that may have happened there. I'm not gonna, you know, look at that, but knowing the relationship that her and Nika have, she's talked about. She says there's so much, like, how big of a help it is to have her there. So it's pretty remarkable, and yeah, to see what she's doing right now and what she will look like. I don't know, say it, the Olympic break. It's going to be a lot of fun. And that was something that at the end of the year, head coach Noel Quinn, to Rowan's point, and GM Delisa Ray said, is we need a point guard. We are going to get a point guard. It's hard to find a lot of better options than who they've brought in. So we'll go over there from there and talking about her relationship to Nika. I will start this off, like, as I mentioned when we were talking about opening statements, seeing just it's this will only go to people who understand the reference, but there's these TikToks, right, of Paul George and how smooth he is playing basketball. That song that plays when he's doing that is what I see when I see Nika. Just it's confidence, it's smooth. There's no panic in her game. She knows what she's doing. Even she's getting smacked a few times in the face at home this year. Like I don't know what's going on, but like she doesn't look dazed afterwards. It's just remarkable. And then off the court, right? I've talked to her at shoot around, calm. There are many reasons she's a president of the WNBA, but you can tell when you speak to her, right? So it's remarkable to have. You've got, I don't know if this is, check me if you need to, right? But you've got the fire and intensity that Skylar brings, and then there's just the like, okay, I got it. Like the even keel. I think those Nika and Skylar's a good, like they complement each other in that way, right? So, and even to Christian's point, and I'm sure you will expand on that, Christian, is the big passing. See, even not only the passing, but her and Ezzy guarding the rim. Like I was never big enough to play further basketball, and I sucked anyway. But like if I was to try and get into the lane there, I'm scared out of my mind. Like I'm passing the ball out. I'm going to hang out on the perimeter. Leave me alone. So I've just been like Rowan said earlier. I never like thought she was bad or overrated or nothing like that. It's just amazing to see it in front of you, on a daily basis. And then with players like Jewel and Izzy that I've seen more regularly. So Christian, we'll go back into the reverse order. Anything you've got on Nika and thoughts on that?
Through the first 2 games, it felt like, wow. Like I've seen, like you guys have said, I've watched Nika, as long as I've been watching women's basketball, going back to the days of before Chicago had a team, when my family would take me down to Indiana to go to go to Fever games. Tamika Catchings is my GOAT, just saying. But it just really reminds you that, wow, she's been doing this for so long and she's been so good the entire time. There's never been a drop off. And you think about the teams that she's been on. She's played with Chelsea Gray. She's played with Candace Parker. I mean, she's played with so many players. She's played with assistant coach Ebony Hoffman those 2 years since she was in LA. So it just really makes you realize that, it doesn't really matter the age, the skill set. The fact that she's a 6'2", 4, they can do everything. Pair that with Ezzy, who is 6'4", 6'5", they can do this almost the same things that Nika does. And you have 2 players that you're not going to get to the rim. Whether they block the shot or not, what I look at really is just the hesitation from opposing guards. Not they see them, okay, I'm going to go this way. I don't want to get my shot blocked. I don't want to cause a turnover. And, like, those things matter in, late game scenarios. And that's really things that I've been looking at, especially between those 2. But, the big passing, and Rowan can speak to it too, as far as the different kinds of leadership qualities. Like like Jewel, Nika, Skylar have all spoken to it, how they have different leadership structures and how they, go about it in different ways. And I think teams really need that. Skylar is the motivator. She's the one that's most likely going to yell at you, get in your ear. And then you got Jewel is like, hey, she's right? It's like, you got to listen. And then Nika is all presidential and, just as great as she is, and she really doesn't have to do much because she's got Jewel and Skylar to do it. But yeah, just all the wealth of knowledge and experience on this team, I just can't wait to see how it further develops down the line,
Yeah, I mean, from a leadership, we were talking about it off camera too. Just last season, it felt like so many questions and conversations were surrounding, how is Jewel as a leader? Jewel's the veteran. She's everything now. And, sometimes in the back there would be, Sammy Whitcomb is, as a leader, veteran leader as well. But I think that's a really great point that now, Ezzy, she's so young, but you even have her as someone who is in a leadership role just because of the impact that she has on the court. But that's such a great point that, now it takes a little bit of that pressure off of Jewel that we know that she can handle, and that she showed last year that she can handle, if last year when she was, making it happen, scoring as much as she possibly could, she made it work, and she did the same thing leadership wise. But I think that can only just help her to not have all of that, on her plate. And exactly like you said, Nika is just so cool, calm, collected. That can only be helpful for the younger players. She just knows all the ins and outs. Even I'm sure it's helpful for her to have the knowledge as the WNBPA president of the business side of things. I'm sure could be super helpful when, we have all these CBA and prioritization things going on that I'm sure some of the young, rookies don't understand. And that can be super helpful. And then, yeah, you have someone like Skylar, who is definitely more fiery than Jewel and, will get you motivated. So I think that kind of at least three leaders in one, 4 if you add Ezzy, 5 if you add Sammy, just everyone brings something really, different and important. And on the court, I mean, that's exactly, I feel like I should have summed it up a little, or what you both said was exactly what I was trying to say. Not that I not that it was necessarily that I didn't, think that she was as talented as she is, but seeing it in front of you and being like, whoa, you can come in to any team and immediately make an impact is just like proving how incredible of a player she is. I mean, she won MVP 8 years ago and she still looks like she can be in MVP form right now. Like, she is just incredible. And I just think that her and Ezzy together, Jewel and Ezzy were great together, but now you have Skylar supporting Jewel, taking some of that off of her plate, and you have, Nika supporting Ezzy, taking that some off of her plate. I just think it's just a really great setup. And back to Skylar for a second, I think also taking some of the ball handling, not only off of Jewel, but off of Sammy as well. I think that, if I'm not sure if I'm remembering this correctly, but I remember last year some conversation about, Sammy doesn't love being a point guard. That's not her favorite position. We've seen that when she's in a shooting guard position, she can make it rain, for lack of a better term. But, she can really make that happen. And I think that having someone to take, more of that point guard responsibility off of her can also only be helpful. We saw how she shot against the Mystics. I think that that's a better position for her as well. And I just think it's just all working so nicely. And, I think that Nika and Skylar can only help that.
You made a great point as far.
You're good.
Oops, my bad. Rowan made a good point I want to touch on before we moved on. As far as, taking the ball out of Sammy's hands. Like, it's great when you have a point guard that can get everybody in their spots, right? Like, that's one thing that Skylar made a note of to kind of hamper down early in training camp. I want to find everybody in their spots. I want to make sure they're comfortable. And, like, that's kind of the reason why I was, like, telling myself, just relax. Everyone has their opinions on what started the season. Through the first couple games, Nika was the team's leading scorer and rebounder. So you take her out of the game for 2 straight games. Of course, they're not going to look great, right? So you add her back into the mix and you say, oh, well, Jewel's not shooting great. Well, yeah, she went from having to take so many shots last season. Now that she has so many great players, it's an adjustment period. But now she's playing great. She's looking like the MVP. As far as MVP, also, Nika is top 10 in scoring. So you might have something there going down the line. But, it's kind of funny how now they're playing well. It's like, oh, wow, this is a team we always thought it could be. And it's like, it's not what you guys said after that double overtime loss in Midi,
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's like, I just never had I'm not going to swear on here because I don't need to add the little not safe for work tab when I upload this, right? But it's like, I just never freaked out. Like, it didn't make sense to. And to Christian's point, you take Nika Gumake off the court, yes, you've still got quality players, but this is still a team that was learning. It was their first road trip after playing 1 game at home. I don't know. You take any of these people who are making these comments and you take their work life and shake it around. And then it's like, all right, you got new people to work with. Y'all are going to go on a trip together. Be perfect. That doesn't work. Even when I first brought Christian on, we were like, we didn't have issues, but we were still learning each other, right? We're still working on it. So yeah, no, to go to the Sammy Whitcomb point, that was something that was talked about. And I think not only she might have talked about that, I think Noe might have talked about that. And that was also in the conversation at the end of the season after that game against the Sparks, where it was kind of almost like exit interviews, but not really. But then Noe talked about it again in exit interviews. We need a point guard. We don't want to roll Sammy back out there like that. And it's interesting because they've given her point guard like minutes lately.
We were talking
And
about that recently. I think we were texting about that where it was kind of like, okay, so I was under the impression that, if Skylar was coming, it would be Skylar at point guard 1, maybe Kiana at 2, and Nika at 3. So I don't know. Just I am interested in
keep an
that.
eye on, though, as we
Yeah.
get through the season, right? We can revisit that. And to that point, though, when we talk about this adjustment period, right? And I don't want to stray too far away from this core 4, but Nika's going through her own stuff too. You go from like a month or 2 away from the college game to you're playing in a team that's won 4 titles as a franchise and is expected to be a contender again this year, while you are, on a new coast and learning from some of the best players to play this game. Again, take all that, be perfect. It's not going to work like that. Like, I don't know why I'm doing this hand, but you get the point, right? So, no, the Whitcomb point is interesting. And again, we can revisit that later. But yes, I mean, I think, you watch this team when Sammy's been on it and she's been part of whether it's a championship or playoff runs, her best spot is when she can come in. When she was playing against the Fever at home, right, is playing that tenacious defense. She was getting really into Caitlin Clark, even though Caitlin hit some big shots at the end, whatever, and hitting big threes. Like, she is a shooter. I don't need her to run this offense. I don't. So we'll wrap that up. But yeah, I forgot where I was gonna go. But yeah, I don't know. With Nika, it is very remarkable just to see this all, and I really wouldn't be surprised to see her in some sort of. It's gonna be tough, right? When if you're looking at MVP, you've got players like Skylar and Jewel on this team. To have one of them be a true MVP candidate if you got them all on the one team, but I mean, you've all got players who are dependable, who are going to be important to their team. And should have an impact if this team goes where it should go, knock on wood. So we'll go over to Jewel, and Jewel we've talked about a little bit with the discussion of NECA, right? It's so much. Oh, no, sorry. I remembered what it was because it works with the Jewel part. NECA I think she talked about it early into the season, training camp and media day, and with me as well, ahead of the opening game. We talked shoot around. She was talking about how with the leadership on this team already, it takes a little bit off of her. I think, Christian, you might remember this conversation because I'm sure you were part of those Zooms. But she felt like towards the end of her time in LA that she did have to take so much of that leadership responsibility. And now it's not all her. Same thing to an extent with Jewel, right? Throughout all of last year, like Rowan was saying, we had to hear constantly again and again, how was Jewel doing as a leader? It was like we were getting every game updates. We didn't need that. And Jewel doesn't like being asked that anyway. So, that is something that I think is important because you've got this group of veterans. I mean, even outside of who we've mentioned, right? Victoria Vivians has been in this league. You look at the bench. Mercedes Russell has been with this team, I think, for just about as long as anybody else. And Mercedes, I remember on media day, she wasn't getting asked no question. She was like, Mercedes can leave. I don't think she just gets enough respect, whether it's about what we were talking about off camera with some people in the crowd who don't like her. But, so it's just, I think it is good for this group, and it'll get better even as the season goes on, right? And they build that chemistry that it doesn't have to be on, the crown doesn't have to be on one person's head, So with Jewel, I mean, yeah, Christian touched on it well. You go from having to take all these shots and being the primary option to where teams are playing junk defense against you, where they've got a box and one. And it's like you've just got one person chasing her around, which, credit to Coach Quinn. I didn't know that was a thing. I learned about that all last summer. But, you've got people who are basically game planning for Jewel Lloyd to now, she's one of the many options you can go to. It's pretty remarkable. And like Christian has said, you're seeing it now. She's hitting these crazy shots. She's creating her own shot more comfortably, it looks like, right? And it's like go back to that head of the snake comment. I got to deal with Skylar Diggins-Smith at the top. I got Nika Gumake down here in the post. Oh, again, not going to swear. I'm not putting that warning there. There's Jewel Lloyd. Like, what am I meant to do unless you've got several star level players like this Storm team has? Like, yeah. So we'll again, we're going to keep reversing the order here. Like, it's just remarkable to see. But with Jewel again, to finish it up, so I can pass it on to Rowan here. Just seeing her finding her own shot and getting more comfortable in doing so. What are you seeing from Jewel early on, Rowan? And then, of course, we'll go to Christian there.
Yeah, I mean, going back really quickly, you brought up a good point that I was going to bring up in my kind of overall thoughts. But I think that so far we've seen, especially in the Indiana game, one of my things coming off of last season that I thought, okay, this is what the team really needs to get better at is closing out close games. And it just felt like every single time they were within 3-4 points of the other team at the end, it was like, of course the play was going to be drawn around Jewel, right? Like, we all know, we've seen her shoot buzzer beaters, we've all seen it. And it just, just something wasn't working. Not sure if that was, Seattle getting better at that to beat Indiana, or if it was Indiana not, playing it correctly. But still, I still think that it felt like there were a lot of times last season that execution just was not great. And I think that we've already seen that it seems like that is getting a little bit better in those close games. So just with that point, saying that I think being able to have so many weapons that you don't need to draw every last shot play around Jewel, I think is going to be really important, because, if I'm the other coach, I'm going to say, okay, we all know that it's going to Jewel, so we're going to play Jewel differently than we're going to play anyone else. So I think just, taking a little bit off of Jewel's plate, or at least having it so the other team is kind of guessing who it's going to be that's going to get that last shot is going to be huge. But what am I seeing from Jewel? She's still the prolific scorer that we knew that she always was. We've been talking about all of these players who are, really scoring well for the Storm, but Jewel is still leading scorer, leading by, averaging 19.8 points per game. It's interesting to see that, even if she's not the only one who is scoring, she still is going to be that scorer. And, that's how it was when Brianna Stewart was in Seattle. They both were prolific scorers, but Jewel still was. And I think that it's only going to help Jewel to not have to be that option, but to, be able to take comfortable shots that she wants to take and know that other people are going to pick up the slack if, she can't get to those spots. So I think that, she is continuing to just stay on a really consistent, just the consistency is huge. And, a couple seasons ago, that was a big conversation. Like, if Stewie leaves, who's going to pick up the slack when Jewel was having a really difficult time being inconsistent? What was that, 2021? I don't even know what year it is anymore, 2022. When people were like, what's going to happen if Stewie does leave? And then we have Jewel, who we don't know if she's going to be on or not. And so I think that consistency that she had to gain last year is still here. And that's really nice to see that she's kind of gotten that locked in. So consistency is key.
You see, I can tell this is going to be fun because, like, me and Rowan are kind of just bouncing right off of each other, points that I'm making and that she's making as well. And I like the flow; it's flowing really well. But one of the main points I feel like we can also expound on, as far as the way that they've been staying in games and keeping these leads, is the fact that everyone is pitching in. I've seen so many different quarters where it's Joe Lloyd has a 10-point third quarter, or Anthony McMagor has a 10-point third quarter, or Skylar Diggins-Smith has scored and assisted on 8 of the last 12 points for the Storm. So it's the way they're going about it in so many different ways that I can't wait to see how it develops further during the season. But also, teams have to game plan for that and situational awareness down the stretch, and especially those last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter. That these last couple of games we've seen the Storm really hamper down on, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Again, that just goes right back to Ezzy and Nika guarding the rim. As a posting guard, I would have to run down and see, oh, wait, okay, maybe I should think twice. But, all of it together, this team is just remarkable. And we have so much more for them to, continue building that chemistry. Just can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, and I mean with going from there to going to Ezzy, like something that I've been keeping in my brain since we talked about NECA initially and a little bit about with Skylar, like Christian, and he just said it there, where this team will be later on in the season. You think about this, and maybe this is a little super big picture, but and Rowan, this is something that you and I talked about throughout the course of last season, and I think even before then. Oh, yes, even before then, because the year before this last one, as he was starting consistently, and then you bring in Tina Charles, which don't get me wrong, if you're competing and you want to, send Sue Bird off of the championship, adding a player like Tina Charles in that moment seems like a great idea, right? Um, it did disrupt Ezzy's because she was having great games, learning. Okay, you got to take her out of the starting lineup, and you lose a little bit of the rhythm that she had last season with Jewel. See, there are connection points here. I feel like that one meme of the white guy, and he's got the whiteboard, not the whiteboard, but the pin board, and everything's connecting, right? With Jewel, I mean, as an all-star last year, you were able to go to Ezzy a little bit, but even Ezzy was still learning, as we've talked about with how young she is. She was still learning last year. And even two players, you can game plan for two players, right? Like when you've got players, and I won't say names because I don't want to be mean, like last year, who was playing the point guard position and can't score the basketball, you can, all right, you're not a threat to me at this point, right? And then I can further worry about that. Again, you're playing a box and a one against Jewel Lloyd. Like you are sending your best defender. I think about best defender, Brittany Sykes, man, giving Jewel Lloyd fits all the time. Whenever Brittany Sykes comes here, I always freak out. But with Ezzy, I think about it again, to go back to it. Sorry. Think about what this time with her and NECA will do for her career, whether it is learning, how to protect the rim more, as she already does. I mean, seeing some of these blocks this year has already been crazy, but whether it's her offensive game as well as he works on that, she's been hitting a few threes this year. Like, I mean, if you think about it, and I don't know how her connection was with Tina, but being able to call upon Lauren Jackson as well with the Aussie connection, Ezzy has a lot of tools already herself, but has those banks of knowledge to be able to grow her game too, which is remarkable to think about because she's already one of the better young post players in this league. So I don't know if I think we've all kind of said a little bit about it with Ezzy. Feel free, though, add on to it, because I know I was all pissy on Twitter about it because there were folks calling it a big three again when it's been hammered home that it's a core four. And as he was an all-star last year and will hurt you, as we've seen in games already. And my favorite thing, I want to use it as a byline, but it's Christian saying so he can use it. I'm probably like just talking with teammates and coaches how an aggressive Ezzy is a dominant Ezzy. And we've seen that throughout Rowan, and can back me up on this through seeing it the last few years that we've talked about, whether it is in 22 or 23. Like when she is in that mode, as Christian has said it through the course of this season, it's really hard to beat her. Like whether it is like getting absolutely violating people on the end of blocks, or when she's going to the rim causing trouble there. Like it's crazy to think that we are seeing her get better and better still, and you could keep saying better and better for the span of a few years. So that just gets me excited. I mean, you can look at the leadership standpoint and look at to the younger players. Like I'm sure having Skylar and Nika around will help some of those younger players. Obviously Nika, right? But with Nika and Ezzy specifically, thinking about that tandem, like it's fun to imagine where she'll be, because I don't put it out of the realm of possibility that Ezzy can be a cornerstone for this franchise. So Rowan, Christian, any additional thoughts on our favorite? Well, that's difficult because we've got a few Aussies, but our favorite post Aussie who's currently playing. See, I can get in trouble there.
I mean, I just think that she, thinking back to what you were saying with, Tina, that's what I was talking about a little bit with these super teams where you're like, okay, so when you're bringing more people in, there's a little bit of fear there of, when you bring these big talents in, what's going to happen to these other talents? How are you going to possibly distribute playing time in a way that makes sense? And I, as I'm saying now, I can see how it is definitely possible. We can see it the way that the Storm is playing right now. But at least back in 2022, when Tina came, that was kind of the fear, and that's kind of what happened. It was like, okay, well, clearly, Ezzy's playing time is going to go down, and it didn't end up working the way that seems like, Noe has figured out how to distribute that playing time in a way that makes sense. And so I'm glad that could be on the helpful end for Ezzy, because I think that it could have been a little bit difficult for her growth if it went the same way that it went with Tina. And I mean, I always just forget how young Ezzy is and how much potential she still has, and how every year consistently she is just getting better and better and better. And I don't think that this year will be any different at all. So, yeah.
And for me, like you both have been saying, she's been developing every season and has gotten better every single season that she's played here in the W. One thing that I look at is the fact that as a career 38% three-point shooter, she's shooting 40% this year on almost 2 attempts. I mean, for a player that is 6'4", that can stretch the floor the way that she does, I mean, she has a terrific midi. I would love to see that showcase more, whether that be running plays for it or her just taking the ball and just rising up and just shooting it. But, Coach spoke in a presser recently when I spoke to her about Skylar's recent, stretch of games and her three-point shooting, and she attributed that to working a lot with what was Marcus Tibbs? I believe Marcus Tibbs. He's the development coach for the Storm. And she said one of the main points that he and Skylar were working on was her feet, behind the line, making sure she was comfortable, and basically just reworking that entire part of her shot since she's been here. And, from my couch at home, my desk, and my computer watching as he play, it feels like sometimes she's not setting her feet before she takes those shots. So sometimes they're like really long twos, or sometimes they're just kind of like rush threes. So she's not really, going straight into it. It's kind of like a hesitation. So I wonder, like, maybe it was like that was like one part that they kind of worked on a little bit more. Like maybe she'd be a little bit more confident, because shooting 40% on taking 2 attempts, I would love to see that maybe like around 3.5, maybe 4, because just those 2 attempts does so much for this offense. It opens up so much different drive lanes for the guards. It really just continues to add another dynamic to the offense.
No, that's a good point. I mean, it's just the various different ways, and it's remarkable. We talk about her growth, and it's like all of us highlight different ways she can impact the game, right? It's like it is very exciting to think about what Ezzy Magbagor can be for this team, whether it be in a again, knock on wood, hopefully contending year this year, to what she can be into the future for this Storm franchise is another. I'm not going to compare completely to another Aussie post player, but just another impactful person, in this franchise's lineage. So we'll go there. This one's interesting. Every team can get better, right? Like, this is a team that should be able to accomplish a lot, but obviously there are things that they want to work on. Where this team needs to improve, it doesn't have to necessarily be one player, of course. Just where you'd like to see more of that growth, whether it is, maybe taking a little bit more of those inside shots with Ezzy. This is something that's brief, and it's not even that much of a critique, because I'll get it started, and we'll go with Christian Rowan on that rotation again. It's always remarkable, again, when I do these stats, is like you see this team is either 1 or 2 whenever I do these stats posts. In rebounding, they're like one of the top teams in rebounding, which are, oh God, the amount of times I had to hear about rebounding last year with how bad this team was. And Coach Quinn was like, it's a mindset. And I know inside she was like, stop asking me about rebounding. I'm trying to get it through. Right. Because I bet she was. No, he's quiet, but as we've learned, she's got that gangsta in her. It's always interesting to see the assist numbers be near the bottom of the league. And I say I'm not super worried about it, because I figure that's going to come, right? Whether it's, I know Skylar's numbers have been solid in terms of assists, but I just figure that number will get better. But you'd like to see the basketball move a little bit more when you've got as many options as you do. and someone we, it's not anybody's fault either. We haven't talked about is Victoria Vivians, is someone who's been in the starting lineup, who I keep going back to this quote because it's always just fascinating to me how Coach Quinn said on media day that she's someone that, for lack of better words, you don't really need to notice. She's not going to demand the ball. She doesn't need the ball to play better. She's going to be able to assist that starting five by whether it is moving the ball, bring the ball up. It's just fascinating to see that. So anyway, my thing maybe is just seeing the ball move a little bit more and more fluid. But as I said, I think that's something that's going to come as the season progresses forward. That's it for me at this moment. But again, by the time when we come back by the end of June, right, maybe it's something different. Maybe there's a trend that opens up that we want to see improve. So Christian, I'll throw that to you.
One of the things I think the team does need to improve on, at least right now in the short term, is the fact that they're giving away so many turnovers, and teams are really feasting off of it. Right now, not really confident in the way that they've been playing, especially safeguarding the ball. The last couple of games have looked better, but the season start overall, it's a little bit shaky. And I understand that's due to chemistry, learning with players, their play types. But some of these live ball turnovers that I've been seeing, it's not really conducive to winning basketball. So I'm not really worried about it right now, but I do think, over time they will take better care of the basketball. And that really just comes with, Scott getting more comfortable, Joe getting more comfortable also, mainly just the guards themselves. And then that kind of plays back down to the post. But as far as, the Vivian's point, whether that be friends that are W fans or friends in the media space, people have always asked me well, why is Vivian starting? And I always get annoyed when people ask me that question because I feel like it's really obvious. I love Jordan Horston. She brings so many different aspects to the game, but right now her 3-point shot is lacking, and that's something that she has to work on in the development process. And honestly, it's probably one of the best places for her to work on that in because this is a team that will give her the space and I guess the kind of not. Yes, let's go with the space to work on that. But Vivians is in the lineup because one, she makes defenses respect the 3-point shot, which is so much for the rest of the players in the offense. And if you don't have that kind of capability in the starting lineup, you're already kind of playing catch up, especially when you play against so many teams that are already some of the better teams that start the season. The Lynx, you played the Liberty, some of the better teams as far as 3-point shooting. You have to be able to shoot threes too. You can't just score twos the entire game. So, yes, I do think that's one of the dynamics that Victoria Vivians brings to the lineup. Also, she's a really good passer. I feel like it's underrated. It may not show up on the assist, but she's always getting her team, setting her teammates up, organizing the offense, and she's really good with that second pass. So there are a lot of reasons why Victoria Vivians is in the starting lineup, And also, starting out with Joe Lloyd, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Ezzie McMagor, and Nika Gumake. How much more star power do you really need? Seriously, how much more star power do you really need?
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting quote I hadn't heard Noe say, about Victoria. I felt like she, you forget she's on the court, but you're right, in a good way. I feel like a lot of the, people that weren't producing points wise last season were kind of a net negative. A lot of the time it would be go in and they're, turnovers, they're just sloppy passes, things like that. But I think, Victoria hasn't necessarily been the one of the top contributors point wise, but she's really just making up for it in that way of, moving the ball and, being there to kind of help make those core four work well together. And she's just someone to, kick out to and make a really smart decision as, a veteran. I think that that's something that, any coach really values, but especially Noe. I think that she really values those, those veteran players who have played in a lot of different systems, have played with a lot of different people. And, I think that Victoria was the best decision in the pool of, veterans that the Storm had last season to, veterans that, were kind of floating around. I've been really pleasantly surprised by her. And I think, obviously some more points on the board would be helpful, but at the same time, I think it's working really well. And like you pointed out with Jordan, I also at first was a little bit skeptical of why Jordan wasn't the one in the starting lineup, but I'm really starting to understand it now and starting to kind of see how Jordan can have that spark. But for improvements, I'm glad that both of you shared really good ones, because I had a hard time thinking about it. But honestly, this is kind of league wide. I think that being in a season that is just structured so oddly with the Olympic break and everything being really, all the games being super close together, I just always kind of worry about getting getting bench players more reps and more minutes when unfortunately injuries are very inevitable in a schedule like this. And so, we were talking about, Skylar being the go-to point guard, and at times it seems like Sammy is the one who is the, second point guard up. And then you look at, Kiana Williams and Nika Muhl, who are getting the least amount of playing time now that Dulcie is gone. And you think about it, and, if you need Sammy shooting and God forbid something happens to Skylar because, the schedule, unfortunately, it is slightly inevitable, you have to be making sure that those players are getting reps when that's a really important position that was, like you said, the main point of emphasis at the beginning of, going into this season. So I just think that making sure that those point guards get some more reps to, then help with that fatigue and everything. I think that minutes sometimes need to be a little bit more evenly distributed, which is difficult when, of course, you have Nika and Kiana, both their first time on this roster permanently. If you're thinking about Kiana, she's been in the system, which I think is really important. But still, I think that it will be important for them to get some minutes as we get even further in this really, really condensed schedule.
Yeah, and with Nika and Kiana, I mean, like, it wasn't necessarily something that I had down, but I think we should talk about it a little bit. But before any of that, with Tori, because I think we should give Tori some love, because we talked about the entire starting five, and we have done that. But yeah, I think the situation between your two, if we're calling them three, in terms of players on the numbers on the court, right? The two threes that you've got there with Tori and Jordan Horston, I think it works out for both of them. As you have both highlighted with Victoria Vivians, like, she can do these things. She's not this random player that they pulled out of nowhere. Like, she's been doing this stuff at Indiana. She can pass the ball well. She can hit the three-pointer. I mean, she's played solid defense. I mean, you don't, like you said, she's on the court. She's contributing. She doesn't need to do too much else. And I can find the direct quote. Like, I won't do it right now and waste our time. But it is something where Noe basically said, yeah, I can trust her in my starting lineup to do the things I need her to. And she doesn't need that extra attention. To Christian's point, how much more star power do you really need in the starting five, right? And you could easily be a thing. You look at any of the sports, right? Whether it's with basketball, football, soccer, baseball, super teams, they don't always necessarily work because the stars don't work together. You're not having that issue with the Storm right now, but, do you really need someone else to throw into the pot? Don't ruin the special sauce you got going on right there. And even with Jordan, like Christian was saying, with the three ball, as the one person of the three right now who can be at practices. That's no digging anybody. It's just how it's going. I see it after every practice. Jordan is working on that three ball, like whether it's the corner, whether it is at an angle from the top of the key, like, it's being worked on. So it is a good space for her. She doesn't need that pressure. And even that was something that we saw last year, Rowan, right? With confidence with her. Her confidence grew as the year went on, but there were stretches where she wasn't shooting the ball great. And so her offense, she was viewed when she was drafted, correct me if I'm wrong, as a player who's got a lot of great tools, but you got to work on them. And she's, I mean, that whole last year, there's a lot of minutes for opportunity. She messed her shoulder up. I don't think there needs to be any rush on Jordan Horston, which is the great thing. Like, you've got that great energy, you've got that length, and she's working on her offensive game as well. And with Tori, I mean, she's not gonna. It was funny. I talked to her too on something that I'm working on with Tori. She very pointedly was like, "I'm a smart basketball player." I wasn't gonna tell her she was wrong, right? But it's like, Christian was talking about it too with with the turnovers, and it made me think about with Victoria, what was the thing that Skylar said? She was like, she had a 9-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. She's like, Noe's gonna like that, and then Noe talked about it, and she did. She loved that. So it was like you've got another player who was only going to who's working on this system after trying to get all the fever system knowledge she's got. Right, she's trying to get that out of her head. She hasn't made any big mistakes, right? So it's not necessarily an area where you need to put someone else in there. She's doing her job. So I think hats off to her. She's going to need to get more recognition. There's the bad press she was going to get because of the incident in Indiana, but be as it be. But no, to Tori's point, yeah, and to go with the improvements thing. Before we get to the backup point guard discussion, because that's not on my list, but I think it is something that's relevant and that I want to hear from you guys. Turnovers is important. That is something that's hampered the team. You don't want to give teams free buckets, right? Whether it is something that leads to an easy layup, you're just giving the ball away. To go back to Christian's point with the star power in the starting lineup, you want the ball in your possession. Right? You can't have Nika Gumake do crazy things if she doesn't have the ball or if the Storm don't have the ball. You can't have Skylar Diggins-Smith distribute offense or get buckets if she doesn't have the ball. What's Jewel Lloyd going to do offensively if the Storm don't have the ball? So, yeah, it's a good point. It is something to work on. And just like we said earlier, let's keep an eye on it for when we do this in June. But this backup point guard discussion, I'm not super worried about like getting Nika super integrated because for all intents and purposes, right? Like having Skylar be here for your like prime contending years, the next few years with Nika and with Jewel under contract the way that they are, like Skylar's your point guard. I'm not worried about that. Like Nika can learn, and hopefully potentially that's your point guard of the future, right? It is interesting though, the last few games having Sammy get those point guard minutes, and even not getting Nika into the Fever game until like 4.5 minutes left, which is fine. But I feel like they were in a good amount of. I mean, Indiana did put a little push. I don't know. I still think there are pockets in the game, and maybe if I talk to Coach about this, she would have a different viewpoint on why it's happening. I think there's some pockets of the game you can bring in someone like Nika who is, has some solid defensive game to her repertoire, right? I just think it would make some sense there. And like to Rowan's point, at some point you need your depth to get minutes. Like that's just how it goes in a lot of sports as well, right? Like injuries happen in like pro sports where we are now in 2024. You've got these athletes doing crazy things, whether they post it in their workouts on Instagram or not. Like these are some of the best athletes with whether it's regimen, all the things that they can do to make themselves the best athletes. But sometimes you push yourself a little bit too hard, and even with that schedule, like it is with the Olympics. So I agree to that point, to the getting minutes for your backups point, because even Kiana, like, there's a reason they keep her on this franchise instead of Jade Melvin. Like, they have confidence in her to that point. And she's been in the WNBA and played professional basketball, and she made this roster, so they have to believe in her. But to get none of them minutes at times this year, when you need a point guard on the court outside of Skylar, is interesting to me. But I'm not freaking out about it like some. I don't know how we're going to describe some of these fans in the WNBA that are new that aren't necessarily helpful. I don't know how
The
we got to
range
describe them.
is fine.
Yeah. You get the point, right? Long term, I'm not super worried about it because I get she's learning her own game. She's soaking up knowledge, still trying to learn Noe. Like when I talked to Pokey, she was saying, no, I was talking to Pokey and Ebony, but Ebony used the number I'm going to reference. They both talked about the verbiage and the different strategy that goes with these systems that Skylar and Nika are learning, and Victoria, right? But also add this to Nika, obviously, as well. Ebony said that they've got 100 terms that these point guards are learning. That's all. I'm like, I get we have to remember a lot, and especially here at CSS where we got all these pro teams, I got to remember a lot. That scares me, bro. And I'm not playing a professional sport. Like, there's a lot. So I give her some space and grace there. I think in this world with everything we got going on, space and grace is only fair. But in terms of, to Rowan's point, with getting minutes for your backup point guards, I am a little intrigued, and that is something that I think when we come back in June, we should look at. So I don't remember how the rotation went. We'll go Rowan, Christian, just thoughts on that. I mean, Rowan, you kind of talked about it, so if you've got anything different on it, for sure, and then we'll go to Christian in there.
Yeah, I mean, that is crazy to think of 100 terms because, you hear about how much plays. I haven't played basketball since high school, so I had a few plays, but, like, I can't even conceptualize how many plays they have to know, all the different things, what exactly you do have to learn when you go to a new system. So, I think that it is really important if we're going to talk about anything going on in the Twitter media world, I think that, a lot of new fans who are seeing this rookie class and what they, did for NCAA women's basketball, for college, for everything, and then seeing Nika not getting a lot of minutes, I've seen a lot of people kind of being like, but I don't understand, kind of, she was such a great college player. How is she not getting minutes? And I do think that it's really important to have that be known that this is not uncommon. It's happened every year. Someone will be a great player in college, and then when they get to the WNBA, they are bench. Like they are the ones who are going in at the end. It's really, Jordan Horston, she got a lot of minutes last year, but that was the needs of the team. And I don't think that I think that it's important to understand that is very usual. It's very common. It's very uncommon for someone to be straight out of college getting a lot of minutes. And so, when I say that I think that, it would be helpful to have them get some more minutes, I think it's also important to make the point that I am not shocked at the way that Nika's being played. I'm not, I expected it. I expected her to be in this kind of role last year. If she was drafted last year, it would have looked different. But now we have, got Skylar, you got all these different pieces, you're back in a winning record. And so, I think that is one thing that needs to be talked about more, is that, yes, this rookie class that's coming in is amazing. And, they've done a lot for different things. They're incredibly talented, but this is just how it's always been. And if the coaching staff isn't ready to play them because they don't understand the system yet, like, that's going to happen. And I'm also not super concerned about how much time, she's getting at this point, having any reflection on how the franchise feels about her, what they think, what value she brings long term. I've seen comments like, oh, they should waive her so she can go to a different team where she'll be better valued. And it's like, unless you're thinking of some teams that are kind of at the bottom of the pack right now, I think it's going to happen on most teams. And that's just kind of how it goes. So yeah, lots of different parts to it.
For me, I hear these conversations and I hear these topics, and it's like, I understand where they're coming from, because just a couple months ago, she was defending Caitlin Clark on the biggest stage in women's college basketball, setting the world ablaze, and now she's riding the bench in the WNBA. So I understand where they're coming from, but also I feel like context is really needed there. You add her to a team that already has Jewel Lloyd, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Sammy Wickham, Kiana Williams, who was a proven college player, has played pro basketball while she wasn't with the Storm. And, coach has spoken very high of Kiana, her ability to shoot the three, ability to set up the offense. All these things matter. So I feel like, as far as we already know how talented this rookie class is, and despite the GM saying that basically she didn't think that she was going to be there in the second round with the second pick. And I understand that, but you also have to understand that situational awareness in games also matters. Like, if the team is down 5 and it's clutch time, or it's been a close game the entire way, coach is going to ride with players that know the system and they can execute plays and get things done. It's nothing against Nika. It's nothing against belief in her ability. It's really just, again, situational awareness and where the game is doing at that moment.
I mean, you saw me pointing at my screen very emphatically. It's exactly it. Like, and even with Rowan talking about moving pieces in context, there's a reason I write the way I do and that I like doing these things because you're able to provide that context. If you look at anything, that's like, it's just like the don't judge a book by its cover type thing. And even with Christian's type of point, like you look at this and going specifically to mentioning how Talisa Ray Noel Quinn were like, hey, we weren't expecting to get her at this pick. We are more than happy. We're exhilarated. All these synonyms you want to throw out. I'm not a thesaurus. It's like they're not worried about this right now. Like if this franchise was so we're pouring everything, like obviously there is the pressure to win the next 2 years, right? If they were fully like, this is last ride time right now, they got picks next year. Trade that right now. Like they're just not worried about it. There's, different points of this. You're going to get Jordan Horston, who's going to be better and better over the years. Ezzy Magbagor, we've already talked about, right? Like Drew Lloyd isn't old by any means. So hopefully, as the time of her contract is up at the end of these 2 years, you're getting more out of her. Nika Muhl is going to be part of that, I imagine. Like you don't draft a player, I don't think, to just be here for 1 year. And again, even to that point, with roster limitations, the W's tough, right? Like Kenzie Holmes you've got her rights. What does the roster look like next year when you potentially have Indiana's leading all-time scorer? How's she going to look coming off that injury? So yeah, I just think both of you mentioning different aspects of this context is important because you do. I mean, you bring her in. Are you starting her over Skylar Diggins-Smith? No. Like, I think her abilities are going to be great. Even at her, like, peak, like, compared to Skylar. Skylar's one of the better, you use the term point guard. Like, there's a reason certain people get that distinction. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's just like Rowan's point. If it was last year, sure, over Yvonne Turner, who can't score the basketball, yes, throw it in there. I'm sorry, Yvonne. I'm sure you're nice, but you get the point, right? It's just I'm not super worried about it, and I think part of it is I want to see it now. I'm not worried about it. Just like we talked about with that first week of the season, let it play out, man. Like, calm down a little bit. So yeah, I think you both provide important context there. And again, I'm very big on context. I'm glad, like, we got a great team for this. I love this.
There was one thing I mentioned when I spoke to Nika. I spoke to Nika a couple of days ago after practice, and it wasn't practice. It was her first press conference after the game that she played, and I asked her, like, you've been sitting out for so long, have there been moments during the games where you thought, okay, you know what, I can make an impact here. I can make a change here. There's something that I can help the team with. And basically she was like, yes, but no. And basically she was wanting to call it a company spiel if you want. But basically her expressing the fact that she knows she's a rookie, she knows there's better players on this roster, and she's here to learn, And I feel like that's really been her answer since being drafted. And I believe that's really what she believes. That she understands that, there's trials and tribulations as a WNBA rookie, especially as a point guard, because there's so much to learn on both sides of the court. Also, like, just operating the team itself. Like Charles said, 100 different terms that you have to learn. And, knowing his coaching staff, I don't doubt it. So, yeah, it's little things like that, she lets you know that, okay, hold on, there's no issue here. I understand what's going on. That's why I'm not playing. But I do think as time goes on, we will see more of her. Though maybe not plays drawn up for her, but we will see more Nika Muhl. They didn't draft her to just, collect dust.
Yeah, and I'll build off of that with the topic that I had, the talk that I had with her after practice today. I'm gonna talk my ish a little bit, so pardon me. But like, I just get so sick of these same one line. Oh, the visa talks. Like we banged that conversation into the ground for however long it existed. I know that woman was tired of this, but she's been at UConn. Like she's had that the pressure of the media because UConn's this mecca of women's basketball there, and even their men's side's they won a title last year, didn't they? So I don't really watch men's basketball because my Huskies suck. So deal with it. But yeah, just hearing her talk about it, I was like, whether it be off the record or not, there's all this conversation, whether it was about the video about Mercedes, about Phoenix, and that incident. I use that because we're grown adults. Like, why are we gossiping about a grown woman not being able to get up? Whatever. Or even her playing time, right? She was like, I'm learning. She's not worried about it. And I can read eyes and I can read body language. She's not worried about it. Like, and she did. I won't say it. But she did. She was like, pardon my English, that's bull. Insert the word you'd like to use there. Like, at least from the mouth of Nika Muhl, she isn't worried about it right now. Like, she's happy learning. She talked glowingly about learning from this coaching staff with Pokey, with Perry, with Ebony, and obviously Noe. Like, I don't know. I just think so much of that is exaggeration. And it's frustrating to see like folks a little bit deranged, online about it and about the situation. And like Rowan said, oh, waiver so she can go somewhere else. Why would she want to go to a franchise that, respectfully, won't be nowhere in a year or two, doesn't have the resources that the Storm have, and don't have the winning history that the Storm have? She said that facility is her favorite place in Seattle. Like, she likes Seattle too. She says it's European like, and I was like, are you sure? Like, she likes the seafood here. She likes the coffee. I'm all right about this. Don't let me throw everything at you. But like, this idea and this obsession that she's being treated poorly is ludicrous, not the rapper. So like, it's just so frustrating to me, right? And especially again to bring it in as folks who have been around this league, right, with all three of us. Whether it was my parents bringing me to Storm game, I was showing Rowan. I'll show Christian when we get off the camera here. I've got all this stuff of the Storm from when my parents had season tickets at Key Arena, and they were bringing yep. Rowan's got it. My middle school self down there. I'm a little boy. I don't know what the hell's going on. I was sitting in the rain after the 2008 championship celebration. Like, we're waiting outside of Key Arena. You know how Seattle gets. I'm like, God damn it. But we're just all these new fans and their thoughts, and they just need this now. That's not how this works. I'm sure we could look at other superstars who didn't get their minutes until later in their career, or even later into their rookie season, right? So that's my piece on that. I don't want to talk about it no more because I get all frustrated, but you get the point. And I think we've all kind of expanded on it. So this one's interesting. This next one's interesting. When the last two that we've got down, biggest surprise of this team so far. We are in a month in, and I realize this will look different a month from now, 2 months from now, by the time we get to, knock on wood, playoff time. But whether it is a player or a trend that's most surprising to you, I don't really have too much. I mean, I just have been looking at this team with an open mind because, again, it's early. You want to see how this team's got to set its identity, right? Something that's interesting to me is I guess how little we're seeing of Mercedes Russell. And again, time will come, but we've seen what Mercedes Russell can be when she's at her full strength. She came off last year off of the tough injury she was dealing with in the 22 season, which, you know, uh, it was a difficult situation for her. Obviously, if she didn't play games, like, she's a pro, sure she wants to play basketball. But you look at her career with this franchise, and when she's at her full strength and her full go, she's almost a double player. Like, she can contribute on the offensive end. We've heard Noe talk about her and say she's like an 8-foot point guard. She brought up the ball the other game, and I was like, what the hell is going on? Christian's talked about the post-to-post passing. So, like, and that's the thing too. Again, I'm trying to hamper my, like, that's why I'm not super surprised. And this is like what came to my mind with this franchise and the surprise. It'll come, I'm sure. Maybe if Nika or Ezzy need a little bit, you're trying to rest them a little bit. Mercedes will get her back. I'm not worried about it. But like, thinking that you've got two of the best bigs in the league in your starting five. Oh yeah, we got this pro and Mercedes Russell who can be a double, like, on the bench. It's fun to have, but I am a little bit surprised. Like, she'll get her minutes, but that's something, at least early on, for me. And maybe, I'm sure one of you two will speak and will jar something loose for me. But we'll go Christian, Rowan, biggest surprise from this team just a month in.
As much as we can talk about Jordan Horston needing to improve her 3-point shot, or we could really just congratulate her what she's been doing great as well. You know, the fact that she's getting to the rim as often as she is. First of all, she's shooting 62% at the rim. I mean, I think that's pretty impressive considering how the height advantage other players have against her. But also, she's shooting around 54% within 7 feet of the rim. So really what that tells me is she's really comfortable with that little fadeaway that we've been seeing her get away with a lot against some of these bigs, especially right at the rim. And the way that she gets to her spot, like she can stop on a dime. She's really healthy. You know, you can kind of see it at the rehab that she's getting back to where she was last year. But the times that she gets on the court, it's been instant energy, effort, hard grind, whatever adjective you want to use. But she's using all of these feelings and all of these motivations to get to the rim and attack. And she's getting to the free throw line as well. So like a majority, I want to say around 60, 65% of her offense is within 12 feet of the rim. And honestly, just keep building on that. You know, of course, the three-point shot is going to come, but right now she's cooking on the inside of the paint. Defenses can't stop her with that first step. That's, I want to say it surprised me, so to speak, but the way that she's went about it and start the season so fast, so dominantly, that has definitely piqued my interest.
Yeah, you took mine. I mean, last season, another one of the like things that was so just always asked about was, how can Jordan be more confident? Like that was such a big, storyline. It felt like, I'm just trying to go off of my memory, but I'm remembering the first few games, it felt like, okay, she's pretty confident. And then I'm not sure what it was. Maybe it was a matchup that I'm forgetting. I know that in the first I want to say the season opener last year was against the Aces, and everyone was really impressed of, how she did with, how she guarded Asia, how she was going up against Asia. And then it just felt like throughout the season, it was really up and down of her confidence. And I love hearing those stats about, her actually getting to the rim, because that was a big thing. You could totally tell that the confidence was coming from not wanting to go into that contact. And it would just be, she'd start driving and then she'd kick it out, or she, just would kind of, choose a shot that wasn't great just because, you have people like Asia, like Stewie, in the paint, going to guard you. And I'm the same way. I'm not sure if surprised is the right word, but just really impressed at how I just feel like her confidence has just skyrocketed like in the off season. And she's, she's driving, she's making moves that just feel head and shoulders above the way that she was playing at different points last season. And you can tell that she's not a rookie anymore. And you can tell that she's really getting more confident in the league, and as she should, because, like you said, she's scoring really well. She's third, fourth in field goal percentage on the team right now. She's like, just doing really, really well. And I've been really impressed, especially when that narrative of, oh, she's not confident, was such a big topic of conversation last year. So I've been really impressed with that. And then kind of going off what you were saying about Mercedes, I think it's really unfortunate and difficult to see when, you have to have that narrative of, is she going to be able to come back to her full potential after an injury? And I hate that because it's so sad and difficult to be comparing pre and post injury. But I would, I kind of was hoping that last season would be getting her back in that groove, just kind of having her adjust. She wasn't playing great, but she wasn't playing horribly. She was doing what she could to help. And I agree that this season, I'm really hoping to see her back at her full potential of what she was before that injury, because she was great. She was, a really, really key part of the team. And I think she still definitely can be. And I'm hoping that this season that there's less depending on her to be a second post presence, hopefully will then allow her to, kind of get back to that point a little bit. Cause I think last season, we've talked about it, it was rough and she kind of had to be depended on as the second big, and that didn't really serve her super well. And so I am really hoping that she can get more minutes to get more comfortable in the somewhat new role that she has and trying to kind of get back to her full potential. And I really hope, I'm not, the Mercedes, the fan that we've been talking about, we always would turn to each other and be like, she doesn't know what she's talking about because clearly she wasn't here, back in 2020, that time with Mercedes. And we all just think she's great. So I'm hoping that she can get some minutes in a place that makes sense for her and get back to those spots that she likes.
Yeah, and I mean, having a
one of the things
dependable
that
big.
annoyed me the most.
You're good.
One of the things that annoyed me the most when Mercedes was coming back was originally back in 2022 when she had that operation to deal with the recurring, I think it was the recurrent headaches, right? I think it was low pressure ones. And after that, everyone was just like Rowan just said, they said the same thing. Oh, well, she's gonna come back and she's gonna be herself. Like that really ticked me off for the simple fact that you can't see her injury. Like you just are already assuming that, well, she looked like she's walking, she looks like she's fine. And that really just shows the way we kind of treat injury in America in general. Like if you can't see it or disabilities, if you can't see it, it's not there. Like that really just shows kind of the ignorance towards that. And, like especially I saw that from a lot of media members as well. And that was really disheartening. But knowing that the way she's come back this season and she's playing really well the minutes that she does have, it's all over her.
No, and that's a good point. I mean, like, just I think just like we did with Tori, I think we, given Mercedes her flowers kind of time here. Like, just again, I was gonna say, just having a dependable big off the bench is never a bad thing, right? Like, I mean, and even to Rowan's point, not to like, I don't know if the right word is to not like disvalue what you said, but I thought she had some solid games post All-Star break. It really started like maybe she started clicking a little bit there. And even like we've talked about with different players and situations, like, okay, Mercedes, now you've got to come back off the bench. You're not starting again. Like you've got to find that rhythm. And I've talked to players in different sports before, so it's not always like directly translated. But like in baseball, if you're not playing every day, you're not playing all the time, it's different. You're not hitting your stride the same amount of time. Could be the same thing in basketball. If I'm not getting starting minutes, yeah, it is. Like you're getting a difference in minutes. Maybe you're not feeling the game as well. Nothing can replicate true game sense. You can scrimmage all you want. You can get the scrimmage dudes that they've got and, do that. But it's not the same as the other players on the other side of the court who are trying to get a check and trying to play their own ball, right? They got their own family to feed. So with Mercedes, yeah, just it is when we see what Mercedes Russell can be. Like I'm thinking back to when she was kind of gaining that stride post All-Star break last year. You've got someone else who can kind of, I remember seeing some of those like the long two is a lost form. Mercedes can hit that long two. It can be someone who is a presence in the paint. And despite that again, it's nice that that person that we're talking about seems to be a season ticket holder, but my goodness, like who goes to a professional sports game and says, and Christian hasn't experienced it yet, but these are like real swear words. And I'm like, this happens like when she's shooting free throws too. So it's quiet. And I'm like, bro, do you have no shame? No shame. But continuing with that respect part, like going back to media day, like she is one of the longer tenured Storm players. She's been through a lot of this stuff in terms of success, being around Sue. Like I completely forgot. Like there was the Natasha Howard years, right? And what Tosh was. I was sick to my stomach when they got rid of Tosh. I was like, but you still had someone who was going to give you those valuable minutes in Mercedes. So let's give Mercedes some shine, absolutely. But yeah, to that point with Rowan, and that goes also back to Tina Charles and the Ezzy conversation, right? If you're able to crack the code and give these players on this roster the best amount of minutes to maximize their potential, that's a championship, right? Am I wrong? Like if you're able to crack that code, especially with the talent that you've got on this roster, you maximize these players, you get the most out of a Jewel Lloyd, out of a Nika, out of a Skylar, out of an Ezzy. Then you bring off these players off the bench in Jordan, in Mercedes. You bring a Samian who's going to hit a three in your face and then immediately play defense on you. The sky is a title. Like, so that's what this coaching staff has to work with, right? Like, I know Pokey and Ebony see our stuff, me and Christian, and now it'll be Rowan. So hi, I hope we get it right. Like, but feel free to correct me. I mean, you see me in person, so you can yell at me. But yeah, anyway, to wrap it up, you get the most out of a Mercedes Russell. That's another valuable presence off the bench. And even like you said, if something, God forbid, knock on the wood, is to happen with one of your bigs, you've got Mercedes, who has filled that role before. So, all right. We've been here for a bit. Let's wrap it up. Favorite moment of the month of May. It could be something off the court. Obviously, we've referenced the Noelle Quinn talk about giving Skylar her own grace. Obviously the wins are great. It could be a favorite as a block. I'll start us off, and then we'll go. We'll start it off how we did in the beginning. We'll go myself, Christian, Rowan, and Rowan can end us off here since it's your debut. This is something that's really quiet. It doesn't have like a super amount of significance to the season so far, but I was at one of the practices for the team. It wasn't a shooting, it was a practice, and they were working on, it was something where Skylar was hedging on a screen, right? It was like this double screen action, and Skylar was supposed to hedge, and she was trying to learn it, right? She wasn't getting it, so they stopped the practice, and it got super quiet, so I had to shut up. And Neka's sitting there calmly explaining. It's like, no, you've got to be here, and talking it through her, all president like. That's why when I talk to Neka, I refer to her as Madam President. I'm not being funny. I'm being respectful. God damn it. Calmly went through it, and Skylar, some like click. She's like, okay, I get it. Let's go. And then she ran it perfectly. She hedged it. Whole offense was all thrown in a mess. Like, seeing that dynamic in just such a small moment in practice where they're just talking about something that's going to work in their defense, like, I'm going to work on it. That's some of the amount of things I have to work on, is that relationship, because it is so big. When they were being introduced before the season started, they talked about how they wanted to play with each other. They wanted to play with Jewel. They've talked about it in the season when Skylar had that poncho on and was talking about what Nika means to her off the court. She can be real with Nika. Nika's going to be real with her. Like, that duo, and seeing them play out and seeing them get to play together is really fun, because we've talked about their highlights and what they can do, but to see them in some harmony that will surely only grow as the season goes on is fun. And that moment to me was a brief example of that. So yeah, that was mine. Stupid or not, think about it what you will. We'll go to Christian next, and then, like I said, we'll wrap up with Rowan before we finish this thing off.
Well, for one, don't ever call it stupid or something that you say or think, my man, because one, is not. It gives us a really in-person, dynamic to how this team operates during practice, and stopping a play and then, Nika walking over, running it through with Skylar. That stuff matters. It really just speaks to the leadership and, the love these players have for each other, not just on the court, but off the court. Like, we've heard how many times Skylar's a reference to knowing Nika since, the Stanford days, and really, AAU days, wanting to go to Stanford on her visit. And, that's working out, but then playing with Jewel, then knowing Jewel throughout, you guys know, but I'm from Chicago in the Midwest. Everyone is related. Everybody is close. We all know each other. So, Jewel playing up in Lincolnwood, which is like a really close suburb of Chicago, and, Skylar being from South Bend, which is really right across the border from Chicago, they've always known each other. So having that come together at this point, they've always known that they want to play together. It just really depends on when that would happen. But for me, one of the things I think that I kind of have to go with, that's been like kind of a highlight for me through this month, is the fact that Coach stood up for Skylar Diggins-Smith the way that she did in that one presser. I think it was after the Mystics game. I can't remember exactly. But, I feel like when Skylar has came back, it's real easy to say that she's been out for 20-plus months and now she's working her way back. And, us as local media cover the team on a daily basis, we understand that on a different level. But to hear some people, especially, mass / national media, talk about it and then kind of just throw it away when it comes to breaking down her game, the way the team is operating and everything of that nature, it's kind of like, well, why mention that at all if you're not going to actually add it into your analysis of the team and how she's performing? So to see Coach defend her the way that she did, as far as giving her grace and time to really just adjust to the system, the team, the city, all of that, I feel like it was really what was needed. Because once again, you can say it, but if you don't add it into the fact of why the team is playing the way they are, or her performance individually, then you can kind of just keep it, in my opinion. What do you think, Rowan?
Yeah, I'm really excited to kind of get to be around the team a little bit more now. Like just the past month or so, haven't gotten to be in many pressers or be around the team, which I think is where you see those really great moments, and which I love the past couple seasons being able to go to practice and go to shoot around and things like that. So I think that any of the moments that I'm thinking of are mostly things that everyone else can see a little bit, but I do think that just kind of connecting what we've all been talking about to just my experience in the past with covering the team. I do think my favorite kind of moment have just been those pressers that Noelle Quinn has had, that she, to me, feels just so much more comfortable and honest, and like you were saying, defending Skylar, or kind of joking about Nneka's comment about her, and just I think that she has gotten a lot of doubts from the outside over the past few seasons, just about how she uses her pieces that she has on her roster. Last year there was a lot of conversation, a lot of fans were kind of wanting her to have a different role on the team, let's just say that, or not have a role on the team at all, let's just say that. And I think that just being able to have covered her, to have covered the team, and just see her getting really comfortable, finally getting kind of like that love from the players that she always has, but being able to see her relationships and how she can help players so much. When you look at Skylar and see how that relationship has helped her so much, just the relationship that all of the players have with each other and that Noe has with them, I think is really great to kind of see. I just feel like on social media, you don't see a lot of her pressers being clipped, a lot of people talking about her like league wide. Like obviously we do as people who cover the Storm, but I think it's been really great to kind of see Noe kind of get some love a little bit like league wide, and just see that she is using her pieces. She is a really, really great leader, and especially chemistry wise. And yeah, so just seeing Noe be more comfortable in pressers and just being a little bit more goofy has been really fun for me from the outside, I guess.
Well, you could have a lot of fun when you're winning, right? She could definitely
Right.
let her hair down a little bit more, especially when she has media asking her questions that aren't repetitive and conducive to the game and the way the team is playing.
Right,
But
that's a
I
great
just wanted
point.
to
It's
add on to
difficult.
Rowan's point
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
because I'm sorry. Wait, am I good? Okay, I just want to say, like, to add on to Rowan's point about Noe. I'm not going to name names, but there are several publications that I've listened to, as far as podcast wise, start the season, that had Noel on the hot seat. you know, Before games had even been played. I think it was after one of the preseason games, and I feel like it's coming from a place of ignorance, to put it nicely, for the simple fact that she took over in 21 when Dan Hughes retired, a quarter of the way into the season. And I think they went 16-10. And the very next season, the last season with Sue Bird, the last season with Stewie before she left for New York, and they lose to who? The eventual world champion Las Vegas Aces. And then you have the next season coming up. That is the next season coming up, where you go 11-29, I believe. And it's just not great. People have questions. Is Jewel really, the franchise control that you want to build around? Is Noe the leader that you can, build around as far as a coach? And you enter the season after bringing in Scottie Diggins-Smith and Nika Gumake, and as he progressing as a player, Victoria Vivians, all these different names, and you're not even giving her the space to even try to put together a good string of games. She's not even started yet. You already put her on the hot seat. So I feel like, we really have to stop that just because we need content, or, purposes or something. I'm not understanding why, especially considering the way this team was played, over the last 2-3 weeks of the season. That take looks really bad. Like this was just a month ago. Put Noyo in the hot seat. How about we talk about, Christy Sides not using the clipboard? I mean, I'm just saying. No.
Yes, I feel like I've been wanting to like get something off my chest about that for like years at this point. It has been, at the end of every season, and you're right. It's like that last, Sue's last game, they lost to Vegas. It's not like they lost to someone who was I don't know. It seemed like something that it's like you can't stop Vegas, and we've seen that the past 2 years. But yeah, I think that it's really great to see Noe. Obviously you're going to be happier in pressers when you have a winning streak. So I guess that's a big part of my favorite moment, but also just I guess I could say my favorite thing has been seeing her getting some more credit for what she has done for this team that has always had a really good reputation. And, obviously last season wasn't great, but, her work in the off season, I feel like she's getting some really good credit, and it's where, it's highly deserved.
We're going to talk aggressive again. I'm going to talk aggressive, so deal with it. Yes, 100% all of this, because firstly, with Dan Hughes, like I remember I was the last person to do a solo interview with Dan Hughes, as one of the PR folks told me. So I don't know what I did to freak out Dan. I am sorry. Maybe it was me reaching out on LinkedIn. I don't know what it was. But from that, I mean, as I talked about in my piece I did with all of the assistant coaches here to talk about Noelle, you go from, again, expectation that year. They lost to, was it Phoenix in the playoffs that year? I think it was BG had a crazy game up at they had it at Angelo Wins Arena because they weren't playing the Key Arena yet because CPA was getting redone. BG had a crazy game, and then came the one more year chance. You go to Sue's last year. There's the expectation there. You've got Sue, Jewel, Stewie, who else was there? Tina Charles came eventually. You've got Ezzy in there. And then you've kind of got, I mean, who else was there to go off with scoring? I remember throughout the course of that year, if you're not getting a ton from Stewie had to carry that team in points wise for a large majority of those games. You had Jewel occasionally, but she, as you've talked about previously with Jewel, wasn't always there, and Sue wasn't scoring as much. She could hit a big three. She was still facilitating, but she wasn't the player that she had been, which even then she wasn't always a big offensive player. She was a great distributor, right? So you go from that, you lose Stewie to New York. And then there's last year. And even last year, Rowan, I talked about this with Rowan at the course of the year. Like, Christian, I promise you, whenever we get you here, you're going to have to deal with me talking your ear off at these games. So please prepare for that. With last year's team, outside of those games against the Aces, which we've seen, as you said, what the Aces did, this team was fighting every game, whether it was Jewel putting up 40, going against Minnie last year. Again, I remember in that overtime game here in Seattle, it was Jewel Lloyd and then Fisha Collier essentially throwing the punches. And I mean, it's hard to doubt Fee, right? Like we've seen that obviously to begin this season. Outside of the players that are on that roster, like it was Sylvia's last year too. Like Minnesota's been good. I don't know why we keep doubting them year by year and not giving them as much attention like with Sylvia's last season. Like I love Sue, but Sylvia deserved that shine too, right? But again, every game, with last year's team, this team was they fought the Liberty hard, right? Whether it was on the road or at home. And then in terms of the fan support, as Nika said previously, when she was here, when she was on LA in the last game of the year, she was surprised. She was like, this game means nothing. Why is the atmosphere so good? Like, so, and then to go into this year, I must have missed it. Like, there's some things that I'm going to miss with the amount of stuff that I have to do. That's just my own fault, something I try to work on, right? But like, any idea that Noelle Quinn should be on the hot seat is ridiculous. Like, I mean, the amount of credit. Oh, and this is where my anger was going to come out. Like the amount of credit that she deserves, but gets from her own players. And then the media is like, oh, you said a good thing about her? Let's get that out of here. Like, if you go back to listen to Nika and Skylar in their introductory presser, they said, I wanted to come and play under a coach like Noe. Like, and they have said that since then. Ooh, ooh, they just want to fire somebody at this point. Like you don't see you don't see an instant heater, and it's like, all right, fire the woman. And like Nika, as Christian has done on it, having a black woman as a coach. I mean, like, and she's a smart, like, I've talked to Pokey. She is a smart woman and a smart player. Pokey
And having
talked
someone who
about it.
played and having someone who played so recently in the WNBA, who literally within, just made the switch from player to coach without skipping a beat. Like having someone with that perspective of recently the WNBA world recently is huge.
Yeah. And she's been asked about that in pressers. Oh, sorry, I thought I cut Christian off there. But she's been asked about that in pressers where it's like, how do you feel the expectation of potentially getting fired? And it's like, why are you asking her that? Like, there are other teams you can look at that we've talked about off camera where you should maybe look at that hot seat. Seattle, the seat ain't hot. The seat I'm on right now might be hot, like, because I've been here for an hour. But the expectation is ridiculous with Noelle Quinn. And to see her grow, as I was going to say, Pokey Chapman, who is a woman that has been in this game for a long time and has coached, is the assistant GM here in Seattle, talked about it when she was coaching both her and Sue in Russia. She's always had that mind for the game. And now, like Rowan has said, you come in, go straight to an assistant coach, and then, okay, Dan Hughes is done. Hey, someone's got to fill this seat. I thought it was going to be Gary Kloppenberg at the time because of his role in the 2020 finals. Like, he had been the main guy because Dan couldn't go to the Wubble at the time. So I thought he'd already been in this seat. It was a natural progression. But as someone, like we have said, has been around this league, has seen it, with Rowan and I in person, like anybody who covers this team in person, will say that, like, they won't even bring that up. They won't say, "Oh, hey, like inside you think Noah's going to get fired?" That's never been a conversation, at least not to me. Like, so, that'll wrap us up. That's all I've got for you for this. We've been talking for a while, so no, it was fun. I mean, just to quickly talk my stuff again, but it won't take super long, I promise. Like, seeing part of the whole reason that I started CSS, whether it's the logo behind Christian right now or the one to the side of Rowan's face right now, like, I really did not like the lack of coverage of our women's teams here, whether it is the Storm or the Reign. I remember in 2020, it was one of the news outlets around here in Seattle locally had a 2020 year in review in sports, and they didn't mention the fact that the Storm were the only team to win a title that season. It's not a year in review, then, is it? Like, truthfully. So
wait, are you serious?
I'm fully serious. Oh yeah, it was a 2020 notebook. Like, if I could find it, I would, and I'd like keep it screenshot in my phone. I like read through it. Like, the Seahawks made the playoffs that year. They got bumped because they were stupid. The Mariners sucked because it was a 60-game season. The Sounders made some tournament and they lost it. Again, it was weird with COVID, but the Storm won a title. I'm looking at a photo of Sue Bird and Brianna Stewart holding. Sue's got the title. Stewie's got champagne in her hand. Like, it's a title. Why are we not celebrating a title? I feel like my voice gets really high. I sound like Jerry Seinfeld questioning things, so I apologize. And again, that's just part of the whole reason I started this thing. And, so to see the way the media world is right now with folks who are uneducated, ignorant, and just flat out wrong most of the time, like, this is an opportunity to have folks who have been around the game, and at least with this being a Storm roundtable, specifically been around this franchise, and we'll have Christian here, I think at some point in the summer and then next year full time. Like, I think the news about this team should come from the folks who actually know what they're talking about and are actually there. So that's my point. That's the whole point of why we run this with Circling Seattle Sports. And I'm just so excited to be able to have, when it was adding Christian earlier in the year and now bringing Rowan on, to have these great minds with the game of basketball and with the W specifically, because it's not like I'm bringing people over from the NBA and it's like, okay, learn this now, So that's the point. That's it. I'm holding people from their time. So I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back. I'm sure we'll talk about something in the month of June, but we'll be back at the end of the month of June to wrap this up again for the month. Until we see you next time, take care of yourselves, be well, and do whatever you can to make today a great day.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, were you going to watch the Seattle Storm away games this year?
Away games. Well, Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, so I was thinking of coming here if that's okay with you.
I think that makes a lot of sense. See you all here.